GamingBolt presents 15 games that shockingly spoiled their own plot. Every once in a while, it just so happens that you're replaying a game and you see something hidden in the background or some hint that you didn't get on your first playthrough and you go, wait, they actually hinted at that? Many games foreshadow their endings or other major plot twists in serious ways, sometimes as tiny minuscule hints, other times as outright proclamations that you probably wouldn't understand out of context the first time you're playing it. Here in this feature, we're going to take a look at 15 such games. Obviously, this feature contains spoilers, so if you see us beginning to talk about a game that you haven't played or don't want spoiled, walk away. Ace Attorney Investigations, Miles Edgeworth. Ace Attorney spin-off Miles Edgeworth sees the players investigating the case of the legendary thief known as the Yatagarasu Thief, with the game revealing later on that the thief is not one single person, but is actually a group of 5 people. Earlier on in the game, though, there's actually some pretty clear foreshadowing of this. A witness during one of the thief's appearances claims to have seen his or their shadow, but is revealed after further investigation that the shadow was actually created by 5 statues nearby. Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. Snake Eater has to have one of the best endings in video games. After Snake is forced to kill his former mentor, the boss, due to her having defected from the US, it is revealed that she never really defected, that it was all a massive ruse, and she willingly let Snake kill her so that the ruse could be kept up. Several times in the game, though, the boss tells Snake in as many words that she didn't defect from the US. At one point, in fact, when Snake asks her why she did so, she simply says, "I didn't." Of course, as players, we all thought nothing of it, but it was only on repeat playthroughs that we were able to understand the real meaning behind her responses. Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Yet another Metal Gear Solid game with a massive twist reveal at the end, only this one is hated as much as Snake Eater is loved. The Phantom Pain reveals to us at the end that the guy we've been playing as for the entire game isn't really Big Boss, that he's just a clone, but the game drops several major hints throughout the playthrough. When Venom Snake enters the boss AI pod, the pod simply says, "It's not you," implying that she knows the person she's talking to isn't Big Boss. Also, interestingly enough, if you ever look out the window of your helicopter during nighttime, the reflection that looks back at you isn't that of Big Boss, but of the custom character face you created at the beginning of the game. The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. Wind Waker is quite an unusual Zelda game, and one of the many reasons for that is that the titular Zelda in the game is quite different from how she is usually portrayed in the series. One of the biggest revelations you make in the game is that the pirate captain you have been traveling around with, Tetra, is Zelda in disguise. However, if you ever enter her cabin on her ship, you can see that there are paintings of Zelda and the Triforce in her cabin. A pretty neat and obvious hint of what the truth is, but also something that is completely escaping your attention the first time you see it. Batman: Arkham City. Arkham City's story was full of jaw-dropping moments, and one of the biggest twists was when it revealed that the Joker that you'd spent a good chunk of the game fighting against wasn't the real Joker. It was actually Clayface who had taken on the Joker's form, which explained why he had been looking healthy all of a sudden. However, earlier on in the game, if you look at Clayface Joker in Detective Vision, the game gives you a very clever and pretty clear hint. He lacks any and all bones in his body. There is no skeleton at all. Batman: Arkham Knight. The reveal that the Arkham Knight Batman spends most of the game fighting against is actually his former ally and ward, Jason Todd, who is believed to be dead, isn't honestly one that shocked a great many people, especially if you were familiar with some of the other comic book stories of Batman. The game itself, in fact, drops a pretty major hint about this early on. During Batman's first meeting with the Arkham Knight, the Knight says to him, "You're dead, old man." As anyone who's read the comics would know, that is what Jason Todd used to refer to Bruce Wayne as. Red Dead Redemption. Red Dead Redemption's ending is truly a heartbreaking one. Just as players start letting themselves believe that maybe, just maybe, John Marston might be able to live out the rest of his life in peace with his family, he is brutally murdered. The game, though, drops a very subtle and smart hint about this early on. During one of John Marston's encounters with the mysterious character known as the Strange Man, the man stops at the exact site where Marston would go on to be buried and says, "This is a fine place." Final Fantasy VII. Aerith's death is one of the most famous and well-known twists in the history of Final Fantasy, and probably the single most dramatic moment in Final Fantasy VII. Her death, though, is actually hinted at very vaguely by Cait Sith, the goofy character that makes predictions. When Cloud first meets Cait Sith, he tells Cloud that he will get what he pursues, but that he will lose something dear, which, incidentally, is exactly what happens. Portal 2. One of the biggest revelations we make in Portal 2 is that the evil, mechanical GLaDOS is based on Caroline, a woman who used to be the personal assistant of Aperture's CEO. The core of her essence was extracted and was then used to create the AI that would go on to be known as GLaDOS. Earlier on in the game though, Chell runs into some sentries, one of whom spouts a bunch of seemingly random gibberish. It's not, however, all that random. One of the things the sentry says is, her name is Caroline. Pokemon Sun and Moon. Pokemon isn't usually a series that cares much about storytelling or having much of a story at all, but alongside Black and White, Sun and Moon have to be the most story-focused games in the series. One of the biggest reveals in the game is that Cosmog, the tiny little adorable Pokemon Lily is traveling with, is actually an early evolution of a legendary Pokemon. The game drops very clear hints about it even before the reveal though. In the title screen you can hear the battle cry of the legendary, and when Cosmog makes its first battle appearance, the cry it emits sounds very, very similar to the one on the title screen. Vague, sure, but also pretty clear if you're paying attention. Dead Space. Players spent most of Dead Space trying to look for Nicole, Isaac Clarke's girlfriend, as the necromorphs ravaged the ship called Ishimura. The big reveal at the end though is that Nicole has actually been dead since before the necromorph outbreak, and that the figure Isaac had been seeing was nothing more than a hallucination. The game though literally spells this out. If you pay some attention in the chapter select scene, the first letter of each of the chapters spell out Nicole is dead. Can't get much clearer than that. God of War 2018. The final three-way confrontation in God of War between Kratos, Baldur, and the dead giant controlled by Freya is the definition of epic. It's an absolute stunning set piece that stays true to the series' penchant for incredible spectacle. Early on in the game though, there is a very clear hint that this is indeed going to happen. When Kratos first encounters Baldur, he ends the fight between the two by crushing Baldur under a massive boulder. If you look more carefully, you can see that on the boulder is a mural that is actually depicting the final three-way duel very clearly. Borderlands 2. The abrupt and shocking death of the character of Roland in Borderlands 2 has to rank among the most unexpected moments in the entire game, but the game actually tells you what the fate of the character is literally the moment you meet him. Players first meet Roland while he's sitting in a cell, but if you look at the wall behind him, written in huge red letters is, "You die." A little too on the nose, frankly, and also very characteristic of the series. Silent Hill Homecoming. Curtis Ackers is one of the bad guys in Silent Hill Homecoming, though when we first meet the mechanic and chop shop owner, the game actually presents him as something of an ally. There are hints about his turn throughout the game though. When you first encounter him, you can actually spot the circular saw, which is his trademark weapon, lying in the background in his shop. While when the villagers capture the protagonist Alex's mother, you can see that one of them actually has the same saw. Ackers' turn isn't really too hard to predict, if we're being honest, but it's cool that the game drops hints about it pretty early on as well. Mega Man 4. Mega Man 4 departed from the series' established roots a bit, when it decided to replace established series villain Dr. Wily with a new antagonist, Dr. Cossack, until, of course, it eventually revealed that Wily had been the mastermind pulling the strings from behind the curtains all along anyways. But if you really pay attention while playing the game, Mega Man 4 actually gives you plenty of hints that Cossack perhaps isn't the game's main villain. In every Mega Man game up until the fourth one, the main antagonist has always branded almost everything in the entire game with their logo. Cossack's sigil, though, was missing from almost the entire game. Sure, it's not a glaringly obvious hint, but dedicated fans of the series would have been able to put two and two together. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.